there's not many players who, in that state of mind and calmness in that situation, and then obviously the finish at the end, really, really high-level stuff.
Arsenal 2, Liverpool 2, but Manchester City the real winners at the top of the table. It was a real game of two halves at the Emirates. Arsenal winning the first half, Liverpool winning the second, both from a tactical and a scoreline point of view. And back again in the Tactics Exposed studio with me, Will Pugh, his Sun Sports tactical guru, Dean Scoggins. And Dino, as ever, you have got 5 tactical teasers that you noticed from the game on Sunday afternoon that fans should have been looking out for.
Yeah, another tactical masterclass. But first of all, it was how Arteta bamboozled Liverpool's defence and midfield with no strikers. Secondly, one of those, Havertz's unseen role in Bukayo Saka's goal, and it suckered Virgil van Dijk. McAllister is number 3, and Diaz, how they out-Arsenaled Arsenal, that's a mouthful, on the corner, and then mind the gaps. Another week, another Arsenal set-piece genius, and it was a great trick that fooled Liverpool. And number 5 is Szoboszlai and Trent's switch from slot in the second half, which changed the game, plus, of course, Salah's amazing football IQ.
Well, look, Dino, it was one of those. Liverpool-Chelsea last week, it felt like they sort of cancelled each other out a bit and maybe made the game a little bit flat or a little bit meh. This one, totally different situation at the Emirates. What a game it was. But you were quite surprised at the way Liverpool lined up.
Yeah, I was very surprised. First of all, that they left Szoboszlai out, and we'll come back to him later because he's fast becoming one of my favourite players from a tactical perspective. But it was the way Arteta sort of decided that we're going to make the pitch massive. And that's a surprise against Liverpool because we know how good they are at covering ground. And we've talked before about their 4-2-4 press and how, you know, the monsters in midfield really going for it. But basically, with Partey playing at the back for Arsenal, as we expected him to do.
Which you guessed,
I did pick him at right back.
Kudos to you for that.
But that also meant that Rice and Merino had an enormous amount of ground to cover. But Arteta's backed them to do it and done it. But the really intriguing thing came with what they did with Trossard and Havertz. And never mind false 9, this was no 9.
No 9
So it was, and it was really strange that Konate and Van Dijk took quite a long time, as did the Liverpool midfield and the Liverpool dugout, to work out what was happening here. And Havertz was drifting out to the right-hand side. His touch map for basically the whole game was effectively sort of inside right, which meant him and Saka were doubling up down that right-hand side. And then on the left-hand side, Trossard was going over to where Martinelli was. There were occasions where when they were lined up, that Trossard and Havertz were actually in line with their own fullbacks, where Partey was pushing up one side and Timber was pushing up the other. And then you've got your strikers, who are not really strikers, in that line. And that was because of what we talked about before in creating that space behind the Liverpool back four. But also it made this enormous gap. So McAllister, Jones and Gravenberch got a bit lost in midfield. Are they sitting in front of their back four because
for no reason
because there's no strikers there? Or are they going, OK, we'll follow them out wide, which means there's this enormous gap down the middle? Or do we gamble and go? And they got a bit stuck. And they got a bit stuck in between all those things. And so did Van Dijk, so did Konate. But you've got to give kudos to the Arsenal midfield too. I mean, Merino and Rice, the ground that they covered was just phenomenal. And I thought that's Declan Rice's best performance, you know, since well before the Euros. He was fabulous. And in a 2 with Merino to the left and him to the right, they dominated that first half.
Well, you said Liverpool looked bamboozled by that. And they definitely did in the first half. We'll move on to Arne Slot's genius way of tweaking that and combating that and seeing his side come out on top in the second half. But before that, Havertz's unseen role in Saka's goal. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, and that sort of follows on from what we were just talking about. And Havertz was doing this sort of move to the right-hand side. And again, I've talked to you about it before, where you almost have a defender on a rope.
Yeah.
And because the defender wants to mark. You know, a defender like Van Dijk and defenders like Konate, they want to go head-to-head with their man. You know, they want to win the duel. They love 50-50 duels, and that's what they want. And Havertz just, you know, and obviously it was an instruction from Arteta, just went over to that right-hand side. And it did 2 things. First of all, it meant that Liverpool pushed up. and left that space in behind. We talked about it in the preview show about
how... Because they felt they could?
Absolutely. And also because what we thought in the preview show, which they did a few times, but I've got to be honest, not as often as I thought they might, was that they'd go direct from David Raya. But what they did more often was play it into the fullback areas where Ben White played the pass from originally, and then also from the other side. But what it means, again, is they push up slightly. They push up. And then Havertz and Saka are sort of almost looking at each other. And you can see in the build-up to the goal, Saka's going like this to Ben White, because it's the moment. It actually happened on 4 minutes. And then they didn't quite score because the pass was overhit. And it was like, that should have been the warning for Liverpool. That should have been the warning for Robertson and Van Dijk, that this is what they're trying to do. They're bringing us up. And Havertz, in a way, you would think, why are they distracted by him? You know, why are they bothered about him? And it's simply because he's neither deep enough for a midfield player to pick him up, but he's not high enough for a centre-back to pick him up. So he's in this sort of no man's land, if you like, in between. And all he's doing is doing it for his mate Saka. Ben White hits this gorgeous pass over the top. Obviously, Saka's still got a lot to do. He's still got a lot to do, and it's absolutely sensational finish. But one thing I spotted as well in the replays after the goal was that Ben White goes up and taps Havertz on the face and congratulates Havertz, because they know that that's the plan. They know that that's the plan before the game. And, you know, they just did it brilliantly. They got it a bit better, Liverpool, afterwards, and Robertson had another tough afternoon after he had a tough afternoon against Noni Madueke the week before. But look, then you're 1-0 up and you're in charge.
Yeah, he's an interesting player, Kai Havertz, isn't he? I think he's a bit enigmatic to lots of football fans, and perhaps the things he's good at and the things that have got him the big money moves and places in starting 11s in Champions League finals for Chelsea and regular starting for Arsenal's there pushing for titles is perhaps all of this tactical work, which is a bit harder to see sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, we did a whole show on it, which you can go back and watch if you didn't see.
The first ever tactics
exposed. It was
exposed.
the first one, and you know, and quite rightly, because Kai Havertz being this tactical genius, and for Germany he does it as well. For Germany he often plays in different positions. He's played left wing back, he plays inside left, he plays off the front, and he's played the front man as well. And that's because these managers and these tactical groups of coaches know that Kai Havertz can do exactly the role that they want to do. And they're, you know, unselfish runs. That's about 3 shows in a row we've said that. And he makes the space for Saka. Boom, 1-0.
Yeah, he's an intelligent player, isn't he? He can
very much so
absorb all this and execute it. So, McAllister and Luis Diaz out Arsenal. Talk to me.
Yeah, and look, it's normally Ben White doing it the other end, and you know the housery, as we called it in previous shows, in the North London Derby show, and before that as well. But it's normally Ben White fiddling with goalkeepers' gloves or getting in the way of people.
Modern day Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, but this time he got done by McAllister, and it was sort of, you know, you're expecting Arsenal to want those collisions in a 6-yard box and dominate those collisions, and Liverpool did it with 2 of the players who you wouldn't expect to dominate. And Luis Diaz makes this fabulous run from inside the goal, basically, to the front post for the flick on. Arsenal don't communicate well enough. But what McAllister does is he leans on his man, who's Ben White, and he's just holding him. And you know, it's not a foul, as we've seen time and time again with Arsenal. And he creates chaos. And if you see from behind, you can see that it should be Ben White who clears up after the flick. And he doesn't, because he's more concerned about McAllister, and then it goes through to Van Dijk. So again, and they did it slightly earlier as well, again, Liverpool. So there was another warning for Arsenal there. They didn't heed it, and it was the first set piece I think they took was Van Dijk who flicked it on at the front post. This time it was Diaz. So Liverpool have worked on 2 or 3 variations of the same thing. And then, yeah, the Van Dijk goal comes in. He's very strong at the back post. Thomas Partey does lose him a little bit, but in the crowd, you know, but again, set pieces in the Premier League at the moment. It's so key. And yeah, credit to Liverpool and to McAllister, because he carries out his little dirty role in there perfectly.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say to you, really. They're almost unfashionable for a while, weren't they, set pieces? Now I think, everyone realises how important they are.
Yeah, Tony Pulis and Sam Allardyce must be thinking there, going, well, when we did it, lads, nobody gave us any credit for it. They just said we were route one.
With respect, that was their plan A, B, C,
Yes,
D,
correct,
E, F and G. Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta do have a little bit more to complement their set pieces. But how do you, just quickly, Dino, how do you combat all of this? Because there's some really, Nicolas Havertz, who's the Arsenal set piece coach, even. Lots of teams employ staff like that now. They're really defined plays like the NFL, like we've spoken about before, most set plays. How do you combat this? Will those set piece coaches be doing defensive work as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And they'll be doing, the difficulty is on the training ground from a time perspective when these games come so quick and fast, is that you've got only a set amount of time to work on the attacking ones, which obviously you need defenders part of those drills as well. And then secondly, work on the defensive ones where you need the attacking ones. And can you predict what your opposition is going to do? And teams are mixing it up so well. Look, I think Arsenal generally have been the best at both ends. Liverpool are very good as well. But it was interesting that Havertz came out of his dugout and celebrated the equalising goal, which we'll come on to in a sec. But they were 1-0 down, really. So that was sort of one each from a set-piece point of view.
Exactly that. Right, mind the gaps, this one. Another week, another Arsenal genius set-piece play. We're keeping with the theme. Now, I noticed this one. You are Sun Sports tactical guru, but I'm watching games more and more like you do now, and this one was quite obvious.
It was fairly obvious.
Before
not taking the credit away from you for noticing it, but it was quite obvious. But the thing about it is that again, Liverpool had 3 warnings. Okay, they didn't score from the first one.
Yeah. So what was it though? First
of all, they're lining up with 4 or 5 players, Arsenal, at the back post, all in offside positions, right? So not offside because the ball's not been played, but all 4 in offside, or 5 if it was in the second time, in offside positions. And then as Declan Rice puts his hand up, I mean, let's give him credit for the delivery as well, which was just sensational. But as he puts his hand up, the 4 or 5 players move into the line and then come back in between the Liverpool players into onside positions. Yeah. So that does 2 things. 1, obviously you're onside. 2, it creates collisions. Yeah. And so because they're bouncing off each other, it also means the Arsenal players are going towards the goal and the Liverpool players are going away from the goal. So it puts it, I mean, they did it twice. Marino actually should have scored before then. And I think it actually was Thomas Partey who blocked him because it was so chaotic in there. But Liverpool had a couple of warnings to sort it out and they didn't sort it out. Now, I think they can do this by just stepping up. And that's very difficult to think about in a game situation, but they have got Virgil van Dijk there.
Yeah, but if you're not... I know that, to be fair, Arsenal did do it once before the one that actually went in.
I think it was twice. I think there was 2 before the actual goal, yeah.
Potentially, but is it not... It feels like that's quite an easy thing to say, so I'll just step up. If you're not expecting that, that is a new set-piece situation Arsenal have employed there. If you're not expecting it, I imagine it's a bit difficult to, on the spot, decide and be aware Virgil van Dijk hasn't got the cameras we've got, have the presence of mind to go, this is what's happened. That's surely more of one for the bench, maybe?
Yeah, and the analysts in the stand as well. And so for somebody to then... They should have got a message on. And look, especially after the second one. But what Arsenal do is obviously very clever because it creates 2 things, right? It creates that thing about offside. But the uncertainty it creates as well is because if those 2 groups of players come together in between each other, who are you picking up as a defender?
Well, that's what
you don't really know. And what Arsenal actually got right, which I spotted, which I'm going to give you credit if you did spot this as well. But on the goal, what they did was they put 2 players in between 2 Liverpool players. Instead of it being 1-1-1-1-1 in a line, on the goal, they put 2 players in between, which means I think it was Konate, might be wrong, but I think it was Konate behind. Even if he's picking up the first man, he can't pick up the second one. And then the next Liverpool player's got his back to him. And that was when Marino scored. So, yeah, look, it was genius by Arsenal, but I would like to think that Liverpool have a chat and go, lads, when Declan Rice's hand goes up, because all those Arsenal players are already offside, in an offside position, well, let's give them 4 more yards to get to the edge of the box, 4 more yards further away from the goal. Let's step up even further, because then they'd almost have to run out to get back onside by the time Rice kicked it. And then also they're further away from the goal. So
it feels like that would create its own problems as well. And then Arsenal are just tweaking something and you have someone running from deep and he's your man.
Yeah, and we had the whole hokey-pokey thing the week before as well, where do you take it or don't you? So, look, it's fascinating to watch. And again, set pieces are such a massive part of the game now. And one of the Liverpool problems in the first half that shouldn't be overlooked as well was the number of fouls that they made. And so they kept giving them free kicks in those areas. So, but, you know, again, credit Arsenal in that scenario as well because they were so combative in the first half.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, Liverpool undoubtedly were chasing the game in the first half. Arsenal clearly the better team, but totally flipped on its head at half-time. You're a big fan of Arne Slot and his just tactical approach to things, and it was a genius switch from him. The Szoboszlai-Trent situation, you were stunned, like you said, that Szoboszlai didn't start the game.
I was, yeah.
But heaps of more praise on Arne Slot.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm gonna say it here. We got a lot of stick in the preview show for focusing on Arsenal, but we have focused on Liverpool before as well. But the focus here should be on Slot. It wasn't actually at half-time that they made the switch, the substitution that Szoboszlai came on. It was around about the hour mark. But at half-time, they definitely made a move where Curtis Jones wasn't playing as a 10 anymore. Yeah. He was playing on sort of the right of the three, so that McAllister and Gravenberch had a bit more help with when Trossard and Havertz are dropping in and when Marino and Rice are pushing on, so that they weren't sort of caught between those two things.
Curtis Jones, you feel, had a bit more of a disappointing game, unlike the Chelsea game.
I mean, he was
fabulous
against Chelsea, but it was a very different game, and it was a very midfield, two-touch passing game against Chelsea. And this, again, because Arsenal made the pitch so big and the midfield area so large, Jones was sort of caught between, am I the second striker? And the other thing is, because Darwin Núñez gets through so much work, he was coming back into that midfield zone as well, which on one hand is huge credit, and on the other hand is, mate, just stay up front. Because we need someone to lead the line. So
unless you're Arsenal.
Yeah, but Liverpool sorted that out at half-time. So Núñez led the line much better in the second half. Curtis Jones started in this position, but it was when Szoboszlai came on. And Trent and Szoboszlai have got this really, really great understanding. And what happened was, basically, I think Szoboszlai was on the field about 35 seconds and Trent was already playing centre midfield. And he just went and played in there, knowing that Szoboszlai's got the legs and the sense of mind to be covering him going back the other way. And they also took a risk that Martinelli was very tired. Timber was, patched up to play and then obviously got taken off for the youngster. But all of a sudden, Trent was picking the ball up in those central midfield areas again. Szoboszlai was stretching the game in both directions. And it just meant that Slot... I get the impression that at 2-1, Liverpool sort of felt like they had enough to get back in the game and score the goal. In the end, they were probably disappointed they didn't go on and win the game, because as dominant as Arsenal were in the first half, there was a period from when Szoboszlai came on until about the 80th minute where it was one-way traffic. And all of a sudden, Trent was dictating play from midfield. He hit a couple of poor passes before his fabulous pass for the goal. And it was because he was now occupying this space where he knew Szoboszlai was there for a little bounce pass, give and go. Szoboszlai was covering him as well, and then he was freed up to go and play. So credit there to Arne Slot again. Credit there to Szoboszlai, who you could see them on the bench just before he came on. They were giving him the tactics board roll. This is what you're going to do. And it was, yes, he knows exactly what he's going to do. And he carried it out perfectly. And then it came down to that genius Salah at the end.
Yeah, well, you've called him Arnie again. So
Sorry,
you're going to get...
Arne.
You're going to get grief for that. You've called him Trent again, so you're going to get grief off of me. Do you think then, just briefly to wrap up, Dino, was it then perhaps a mistake not to start Szoboszlai?
Well, that's a difficult one to quantify. I mean, from a tactics perspective, yes, I think it was a mistake not to start him. But Curtis Jones had played so well the week before. How do you leave him out? And then Gravenberch and McAllister have been so good all season. So, look, it's a nice problem to have. Which one of those guys are you going to leave out? But, I mean, as I say, in the end, it came down to a couple of pieces of genius to get the equaliser. First of all, Trent's pass, Trent Alexander-Arnold's pass over the top, and then the quality of Salah and the IQ to know from the pass he was offside. Okay, he knew he was offside, so he lets Darwin Núñez go, and then to loop round the back of him for the second pass. You can say, oh yeah, it's just a run. It's just because he wants to score. there's not many players who, in that, late on in the game, intense game, he'd been very frustrated a few times before, to have that state of mind and calmness in that situation, and then obviously the finish at the end, really, really high-level stuff.